Good day, everyone. My name is Jima Adesamo, known as Gas, and today on our platform, we are here to solve mean, standard deviation, variance, sample standard deviation, and sample variance using the calculator. The calculator is going to aid us solve this quickly, specifically when such questions are given in the examination hall. But before that, you would have to clear your calculator. You don't know who has used the calculator or some figures that has been inputted in the calculator. In order to make your work accurate, you would have to clear the calculator for the calculator to be set and ready for the job. So how then do we clear our calculator? By pressing on the shift button on the calculator and the 9. When you do that, you press shift and you press 9, the figure 9 as well. You are going to see setup, you are going to see memory, you are going to see your. So you set it up. So you press 1 and you equal to, which is yes. So that is it. It is complete and our calculator is ready for action. Ready for action. So now when such question is given to you in an examination hall, this is how we are going to use the calculator to solve for our mean, our standard deviation, our variance, our sample standard deviation, and our sample variance. So you have your class limit here. We have our class limit. We have our frequency here, and we have our midpoint, which is the x value. So with the x value, you will have to determine the x value yourself. Without these x values, we can't go ahead to solve for our mean, standard deviation, variance, sample standard deviation, and sample variance using what our calculator. Someone will ask, how then do we find or how then do we solve for the class midpoint or the x values? So these midpoint or the x values are solved by adding the lower class limit to the upper class limit and you divide it by 2. You add the lower class limit to the upper class limit and you divide it by 2. So now let's solve for our midpoint here. So you have 2 plus 14, which is 16. So you divide the 16 by 2. And when you do so, you are getting 8. When you do so, you are getting 8. You can also take your calculator as I'm solving. You solve it along with me so that we can all be on the same line. So we add the lower class limit to the upper class limit. And when we do that, we are getting 16. And we divided the 16 by 8. We divided the 16 by 8. We move on to the next line, which is 15 to 27. So you add the 15 to the 27, you are getting 42. And when you divide this 42 by 2, what are we getting? We are getting 21. So now let's look at something here. You can go ahead to do the same for all these class limits. But the simplest way we can go with this is that after getting the first midpoint and the second midpoint, you can decide to find the difference. You can decide to find the difference. So 21 divided, subtracted from, sorry, 8 subtracted from 21, we are getting 13. So when you get 13, that is the difference. So you can decide to add 13 to all the figures here. So now let's add 13 to 21. What are we getting? We are getting 34. We add 13 to 34. We are getting 47. We add 13 to 47. We are getting 60. You add 13 to 60. You are getting 73. 73. You add 13 to 73. You are getting 86. So that is the trick here. That is the trick here. You can also decide not to go by this trick or not to go by the shortcut, but you can also decide to go the normal way by adding the lower class limit to the upper class limit and dividing it by 2. When you do it, you are getting the class midpoint. You are getting the midpoint, which is the x value. So now we have our x value. So now that we have our x value, we move on to find our mean. Then we proceed to the standard deviation, then to the variance, then to the sample standard deviation, and to the sample variance. This is the part you should be very, very focused. because I'm going to show you the tricks in using the calculator, which is going to aid you solve for measures of variation questions like you finding your mean, your standard deviation, and so on and so forth. So we start with the mean. We start with the mean. So first of all, you press mode. You press mode, and when you press your mode, we have various options here. We have various denominations here, but remember that this is related to statistics. So you are going to see stat here. So when you see the stat, you press the 3, which is the option 3. You press the stat, which is the option 3. Now when you press the option 3, these are the denominations that come. These are the denominations that come, and we are going to go with the first option, which is the 1 minus the VAR. 1 minus the VAR. So we press the 1 as well. And when we press the 1, we are having an indication of x values here. We are having an indication of x values here. So what we will have to do is that we are not going to use only the x values. We are not going to use only the x values, or we are not going to use only the midpoints here, but rather we are working with the x values and the frequency as well. So then what do we do to get our frequency here as well? So now watch me. What you are going to do to get the frequency attached to the x is that you press your shift and you press mode as well. When you press shift and mode, the denominations here that first come, you are not seeing start here. But remember, as I said, you are dealing with statistics, so you have to see start and press on start. So there is an arrow here. The arrow here indicates that there are some of the denomination, or there are some of the options down there that we can also what figure out. So we direct our arrow down here, and when we do so, we are seeing start here. We are seeing start here, which is the fourth option, start here. So we press the fourth option. When you press the fourth option, you are seeing frequency question mark on and off. So since we need the frequency as well, we will have to on the frequency. So we on our frequency, and now just look, we have our x values, sorry, we have our x option, and we have our frequency space here as well. So what you do is that you input the figures here, you input your x values, and you input your what frequency values as well. So now let's start. So we have our x value. So starting with 8, you press 8, then you equal it to the x. So you press 8, then you press the equal to sign. Then you move on to 21, then you do same 21, then the equal to sign. 34 equal to sign. 47 equal to sign. 60 equal to sign. 73 equal to sign, and 86 equal to sign. So now we have the x values. So now we would have to move on to the what? The frequency. So now we direct our arrow to the right. And now, since we've directed the arrow to the right, the option has been placed at the bottom. But since we would have to start from the apex by inputting our figures, we would have to move upwards to the first line. So it will have to correspond to the x values, which is the midpoint. So you see we have 8 here. So the frequency has to correspond with the 8. So now we have 13. So 13 equal to 9 equal to sign. 11 equal to sign. The 4 equal to sign. 6 equal to sign. 7 equal to sign. And 10 equal to sign. So now that we have our x values and we have our frequency values as well, what you do is that we would have to store the data. We would have to store the data. So now, how then do we store the data? We store the data by pressing AC. Before you go ahead to press the AC, you have to know that you are done inputting your figures for the midpoint, which is the x and the frequency. And you have to make sure they are in line and they correspond to each other. So now, since we are sure that the x values are inputted and the frequency values are inputted and they correspond, we store our values by pressing AC. So now we've pressed AC, we've stored our values. So now we would have to go and find the work itself. We would start the work itself. So now, since we've stored our values, we would have to press Shift plus 1. You would have to press Shift plus 1. When you press Shift plus 1, you see VAR, which is the variance there. So that is what we are going to use. So you choose the option 4. After storing your values by pressing the AC, you press the Shift plus 1. When you press the Shift plus 1, these options appear and you choose option 4, which is the VAR. So let's choose option 4. We've chosen option 4. What are we seeing here? We are seeing 1, 2, 3, and 4. This is what we are going to use to solve for the following mean, standard deviation, variance, sample standard deviation, and sample variance here. I'm about to explain it, so please listen to me attentively. So now, the first option is the what? Is the number of observations. The first option is called the number of observations, which is the N here is called the number of observations. So now the number of observation is the what? The sigma F is the sigma F. So now we would have to know the number of observations as well. So we press 1 and we press equal to. So the number of observation, which is the sigma F, is 60. You write your 60 here. You write your 60 here. So now we have our 60. So now let's move on to find our mean. So we do the same. Then we press the 4, which is the variance again. Then we come back to where we were. So now we are done with the n, which is the number of observations. Good. So now let's move on to the 2. The 2 here is the what? Is the mean. The 2 here is the mean. The 2 here is what? Is the mean. So now we have our mean here that we are supposed to get. So now we press the 2, then equal to. So now we have our mean to be 43.1. 43.1. So now that we have the mean, we go back to where we were. So the Shift plus 1, then 4. So we are done with our what? Our number of observation, which was 60. We are done with our mean, which is what? 43.1. So now the 3 here is what we call the population standard deviation. Is what we call the population standard deviation. So now we will have to find our what? Population standard deviation, or the standard deviation. Standard deviation. So now we press on the 3, then equal to. So we have 28.21. 28.21. Now that we have the 28.21 and the other figures attached to it, this third question is asking us to find our what? Variance. So now what you do is that after getting or after pressing on the population standard deviation to get your what? Standard deviation, you square it. You square it to get your what? Your variance. So now after doing this, you don't go back. You just press what? Your square here. You just press this. You press this to square it, and when you square it, what are you getting? You are getting 795.99. So we have our variance to be 795.99.99. Good. So now we are done with the standard deviation, we are done with the mean, and we are done with the variance. We move on to what? The sample standard deviation and the sample variance. So let's move back where we were as usual, your 4. So now we are done with this, that, and this. So now we move on to the fourth part. So the fourth part is what we call what? The sample standard deviation. The sample standard deviation. So in order to get your sample standard deviation, you press your 4, then equal to, your 4, then equal to, and you are getting what? 28.45. You are getting 28.45. So now after getting the sample standard deviation, you will have to calculate for your what? Sample variance. and it's a replica of what we did for the standard deviation and the variance. After getting the standard deviation, we squared it to get our what variance. So this is the same thing you are going to do here. We have our sample standard deviation here. So now we having our sample standard deviation, we are going to square it like what we did for the standard deviation, the population standard deviation. So now we square it, and when we square it, we are getting 809.48 0.48. So now this is how to calculate for your mean, your standard deviation, your variance, your sample standard deviation, and your sample variance. Now, so with the normal approach where you wouldn't have to use a calculator, you would be asked to find sigma fx, you'll be asked to find sigma f, which we did here. There, that's the number of observations, which is the 60. You will have to find your sigma fs squared. So with that one, so you can use the calculator. So in finding the sigma fx and also finding the sigma fs squared, the sigma fs is found by multiplying your frequency by your midpoint, and you get the sigma fx values, then you get the total. Yes. Then also you find you square it to get what? The sigma fs squared. So now you can also use the calculator to do that when you are giving the long approach to use. So with that one, you press your shift plus your one. And when you press the shift plus one, you press the third option, which is the sum. And when you press the third option, you see you are seeing your sigma fx squared here, and you are also seeing your sigma fx. It's simple as that. So you can use this when finding your sigma fx and when finding your sigma fs squared for the long approach. For the long approach. So now that we are done, we would have to, or I would have to take you through how the whole process was done, so that you can also be well abreast with yourself that you can do this using the calculator. So first of all, I said before you start, you will have to clear your calculator and make sure that your calculator is well set up for the job. And after doing that, with that one, how then do we do it? You do it by pressing shift plus 9, then you select the option 1, which is set up, option 1, which is set up, then equal to. Yes, so now you've cleared your calculator, making sure it's well set for the job. And now, before you move on, you would have to get your x values, which is the midpoint, your x values. And the x values are gotten by adding the lower class limit to the upper class limit that it corresponds to. Then you divide it by 2. So here we added the 2 to the 14. Yes, and we had 16, and we divided it by what? We divided it by 2, and we had 8. That was the same thing we did here. And I said after finding the first midpoint and the second midpoint, you can subtract the first one from the second one. You get the difference, and you can choose to add the difference to all of them to also get your what? Your midpoint. You can also go by the normal way by adding the lower class limit to the upper class limit and dividing it by the 2. When you are done, now the job itself starts. So you press your mode, and since when you are done pressing your mode, the options show up. And since we are dealing with statistics, you choose option 3. Option 3. After choosing option 3, other denominations also pop up. And we are going with the first denomination, which is the 1 minus the VAR, the variance. That is what we are using. So we press the 1. And when you press the 1, you see a space for x values. And you should know that we are dealing with both x values and what the frequency values. So you will have to make a room for what the frequency values. How then do we get our frequency here as well? So with this one, you press your shift and you press your mode as well. When you press your shift and you press your mode, you see that there are options here, but we can't find statistics here, or we can't find stats here. But there is an arrow here. What this arrow is indicating that there are some of the options at the bottom. So we direct our arrow down there, and when we do so, we are seeing stats here, which is the option 4. So we press the option 4 and we turn our frequency on. When we turn our frequency on, we have our x values, which is our midpoint, then also our frequency here. So you will have to input the f values in the s column, and also you input your frequency in the frequency column, and you should make sure that they should correspond and it should tally. After doing that, you will have to store your values. How then do we store our values? By pressing AC. By pressing AC. So now that you press AC, you've stored your values. We are now heading towards where to get our mean, our standard deviation, our variance, our sample standard deviation, and our sample variance. So with this, you press Shift plus 1. Yes, Shift plus 1. Now that we have the Shift plus 1, we are seeing our options here. We have the VAR, which is the fourth option, the variance, and that's what we are dealing with. So you press the fourth option, which is 4. The first option here, after pressing the VAR, you see what number of observations, and it's represented by N. So the N here is the number of observations. So in order to get your number of observations, you press your 1, then equal to, then you get your number of observations. So let's see 1, then when you press the 1, you see this, which is the N, then you press equal to. When you are done, you move back, you press your Shift plus 1 again, then you come and press the 4, which is the VAR. When you are done with the number of observations as we did, you move on to the mean. So the 2 here stands for the mean, and you do same, you press the 2, then you press equal to, you get your mean. And after getting the mean, you come back. You come back to this space, and you come and do with what? The third option. Now, the third option is in two folds. The first fold, this third option is representing population standard deviation. So you press your 3, then equal to get your what? Your population standard deviation or your standard deviation. Now, after getting your standard deviation, you don't leave there. You square the standard deviation you had by pressing the S squared here, by pressing the S squared here. And when you square it, you press equal to, the answer you get is your variance. The answer you get is your variance. After doing that, you move there, then you come back to normal, which is here. You come back here. And when you come back here, you press your 4. And the 4 is representing your sample standard deviation. So when you press your 4, you press equal to as well. Then you get your sample standard deviation. After getting the sample standard deviation, you don't move, you don't press anything. What you do is that you will have to solve for your sample variance. You do a replica of what you did for the population standard deviation by squaring your sample standard deviation. So the answer you get, you press your S squared, then you get your sample variance. So now, this is how you use the calculator to solve for your mean, your standard deviation, your variance, and your sample standard deviation and your sample variance. Thank you very much.